Wow, 32.1 miles per gallon with an EcoBoost Maverick with the 4K tow package, hot weather, going up and down hills, a lot of hilly driving, a lot of fast highway speeds. And again, this is combined MPG of 32.1. The truck is rated at 25 combined by the EPA. So with the hot weather, even using air conditioning, by the way. So how did that happen? And how accurate is it? Well, I would like to propose that this is actually very accurate MPG for the actual miles per gallon for running the engine. Now, I'm going to get back to that in just a moment, but I'll start by saying that when I calculated the actual gallons of gasoline that were used, and I factored that in with the miles that were driven, it came out to almost the same. So still very high, not quite as high, but very high, 31.2. So even if the 31.2 was the most accurate, which in a way it is, but in a way it isn't. Again, more about that later. Whether 31.2 or 32.1, excellent MPG with all those factors I mentioned, the hills, the hot weather, the high speeds, the air conditioner. And given that this is the turbocharged model, not the hybrid one. So with that, by the way, you can certainly get better mileage per gallon with the hybrid. So that is really amazing what kind of gas mileage you can get with that. So if you have a hybrid or you're thinking of getting the hybrid Maverick and you want lots of gas mileage, way to go, because that's going to get you the best. But if you want better towing capacity, or you need that, or you just want more of a sporty feel, although the hybrid, from what I have seen online, seems to be very sporty nonetheless. You know, there's different choices. Let's summarize it by saying that. But if you want lots of sportiness, lots of power, lots of capacity for what it is, of course, there's always going to be something bigger and better out there. But for what it is, it's amazing to get that kind of combined mileage per gallon. Not just highway MPG, but combined. Now, of course, everybody's driving habits are different. But as far as how that came about for me, I have 3 key tips that shouldn't have a huge impact on your overall driving habits, but these 3 key tips can end up helping you with whatever vehicle you have, Maverick or otherwise, to get some of the best MPG possible and still be able to drive it the way that you are used to driving it, in more of a sporty manner or more of a relaxed manner, whatever. However your driving style, these 3 keys are going to be helping you to get the most mileage per gallon from your vehicle. So number 1, this one is my favorite because it's very easy to do this, and it can have a definite impact on your MPG, and that is to pump up your tires and make sure that they're pumped up properly. Now that may sound almost like a cliche at this point, but find out by looking in the door jamb of your vehicle. Any modern vehicle that I am aware of has the correct inflation pressures for your tires right in the driver's side door jamb. Now, besides that, you don't just want to pump them up to that particular pressure, and make sure you have an accurate gauge, like an AccuTire digital gauge, something like that. I recommend a digital one, a good one. Doesn't have to be extremely expensive, can be like $12, but it's worth it in my opinion. So when you pump up the tires, you have to factor in temperature. So if, let's say you have your vehicle in the garage and the garage is 80 degrees at a particular time when you pump up the tires, if when you're going to be doing a lot of your driving, it's only 60 degrees. Now this is in Fahrenheit. There are similar rules that you can follow if you use Celsius and you use a different measure of pressure instead of the pounds per square inch or PSI. So main idea is be aware of the temperature. Back to my example. 80 degrees in the garage when you pump it up, but you're doing your driving when it's 60 degrees outside. That's 20 degrees in difference, obviously, but for every 10-degree difference in temperature, there's going to be a 1 psi difference in your tires. So what I will typically do, if I know that my garage is roughly 20 degrees warmer than it's going to be outside when I'm doing a lot of my driving, then I will inflate my tires 2 pounds per square inch, because it's 1 psi difference for every 10 degrees in temperature Fahrenheit. So I will inflate them 2 psi higher than what the door jamb says, in anticipation for those lower temperatures when I'm actually doing my driving. Now what you don't want to do is try to make some kind of compensation once you've already heated up the tires by driving it, that kind of thing. You want to measure the temperature when the vehicle has been parked, ideally overnight, but at the very least for a few hours before you go and measure the temperature, so that you get an accurate measurement. Again, because the hotter the tire, the higher it's going to register, but it may be a false high pressure because of the temperature. Okay, so number one, make sure that you are inflating your tires properly, and I will add, make sure that you are compensating for the temperature at least to a certain extent. This is extremely important in winter temperatures, where there can be huge differences between the hot temperature of your garage versus the freezing cold temperature outside. Okay. The second thing is, if your vehicle has an eco mode and you want to get the best gas mileage, go ahead and turn on that eco mode. That's what I did for this particular example with my Ford Maverick. Now, most of the time I have and intend to, going forward, use the normal mode, and once in a while turn on the sport mode. But for this purpose, I wanted to see, well, how far could I get with my mileage, first of all, and then I was happy to see that one tank of fuel would get me 528 miles according to the calculator. Okay. The third thing is, make sure that you have regular maintenance done. So if the engine is having to work harder to breathe through a dirty air filter, or if it is not getting as much lubrication and therefore is experiencing higher friction because of not changing your oil at the proper interval, and generally it's better to change it too soon rather than on time, but at the very least change it on time. Watch what your manual says. There's a certain length of time, there's a certain number of miles, and pay attention to whether you drive in severe driving conditions. From what I gather, I would say the majority of owners drive according to the severe conditions. I will say that for me personally, generally speaking, currently, I would drive according to the normal conditions, not the severe conditions. So I don't have to change mine as often. Doesn't mean I won't change it a little more often than what's listed in the manual, or a little bit sooner than what is recommended. But the nice thing is, I don't do a lot of short trip driving. I don't do a lot of extreme temperature driving. I don't do a lot of dusty condition driving. I don't do a lot of driving right near the coast where there's a lot of salt air and so forth. So those sorts of things tend to cause you to have to do your maintenance, oil changes, etc. more frequently. But that's a little bit different topic for now. But just make sure you are doing that, because one other thing to be aware of, a lot of owners do not realize how much is controlled within the engine by the oil. It doesn't just lubricate the engine, it also keeps the engine cooler more easily. And the valve timing, with especially modern engines within the past 10 to 20 years, that valve timing is generally controlled hydraulically by the oil. So if the oil is not the right consistency because it has become polluted by gasoline, which naturally will start mixing in with the oil, especially if you're doing a lot of short trips. But even if you're not, there's a certain amount that's going to blow by the piston rings and mix into the oil. And also there's sludge that happens with the age of the oil, temperature fluctuations, and so forth. And that can gum up the tiny little passageways where the oil is acting as the hydraulic fluid for adjusting those valves depending on the speed and load of your engine. So if all of a sudden your valve timing is completely erroneous when you're trying to drive your vehicle, you're going to get considerably less mileage per gallon in at least the worst case scenarios, and your emissions and so forth are going to be much worse. So in quick summary of what I just went over, number one, make sure the tires are properly inflated. Number two, use eco mode if you are wanting to get the best possible gas mileage, if your vehicle has that. If not, there are ways you can simulate it by how you drive, but I'm recommending what you can do to avoid having to change your driving style. If you want to, great, that'll help even further. And then number three, make sure you're getting your regular maintenance done, and if anything, ahead of time rather than late. Okay, now a couple of things about how the gas mileage meter works on your vehicle. Okay, so first of all, here is a quick link. If you look up here, that is going to be a link to some information if you want to do a deep dive into how this works and how accurate those meters can be. Besides that, I will summarize by saying, in ideal situations, to get an accurate result, the computer on your vehicle is going to be monitoring the actual fuel that is injected in the engine, along with a number of other factors, to find out how much fuel is being used, and then do a simple math equation, if you even want to call it an equation, to find out how much gas mileage you're getting based on how much is being injected in the engine and how many miles you're traveling. Now, it may seem like it would make the most logical sense to just simply say, okay, well, the gas gauge is going down by X amount, the fuel tank is emptying out by X amount, and the vehicle is driving X amount of miles. But keep in mind, you can get an instant reading on your gas mileage, and that should not be drastically affected by if the gas in the tank is sloshing around, or if you're on an incline, or anything like that. Whereas the computer for your engine is going to be monitoring multiple parameters, and one of those parameters is the amount of fuel that is being injected into the engine through an air-fuel ratio and so forth. And of course there are different systems out there, but if you want to see what Consumer Reports uses as an external system to do essentially that same thing, take a look up at this video where the particular meter is being spliced in to be reading the fuel that is being injected essentially into an engine to get a super accurate reading and to calculate extremely accurately what the actual miles per gallon is for that particular vehicle. Okay, so one thing I will also mention, you may recall at the beginning of this video that I said that I received a result that was 31.2 miles per gallon when I did the calculation based on how much fuel was actually needed to fuel the tank back up, and figuring that in with the actual miles driven. And that was 31.2 for the results. But the meter in the vehicle was saying 32.1. Well, yeah, that's only 9/10 of a mile per gallon difference. So less than 1 MPG, you know, not a huge deal. But keep in mind, this is hot weather. And when I am doing my calculation with how much fuel is needed to bring the gas tank back up to full, I am needing to add fuel based on how much has actually gone down in the tank. And there are other ways that you can lose your fuel through evaporation, for example. There's a number of different systems, and the fuel tanks, yes, they are somewhat airtight to an extent, but there is going to be some evaporation. And there's, you know, the evaporative emission system and so forth. There's a lot of different ways that you can lose some fuel through evaporation. And that, I believe, is a partial factor. And then the rest of the difference is just going to be that none of these measurements are going to be absolutely perfect. Even though I fuel up generally the same way and even use the same pump usually, there's going to be variables, and the computer is going to do its best to figure in real time, but measurements are not going to be absolutely perfect to the millionth decimal point, etc. So you get the idea. But in any case, it's really great to be able to get this much gas mileage on my Maverick. And best wishes to everyone, regardless of your vehicle type, to get the most mileage out of your vehicle. And guess what? You're going to save some money that way too. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye for now.